welcome back, viewers at home. You're certainly tuning in right here on Prime Live Channel 345. We're about to have quite an interesting conversation, all things e-commerce, and I think it's so important for us to be quite informed so we can best position ourselves, especially those who want to break into the world of entrepreneur or just have a business and want to market all of your clients who are from different provinces, if not different countries. Because if you are not going to be informed and if you're not going to be aware about what's happening, especially in the space of e-commerce, then certainly you will not only lose business, but you'll also lose potential customers, and you'll just lose the potential to grow. But joining me for this conversation is Brendan Peterson to just share his insights on the current state of play and include the role of global entrants and the impact of regulatory changes and the outlook for future growth. Brendan, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much always for having me.
Now, before we get started in understanding the opportunities that are offered by the e-commerce, can you please give us a quick summary on the current state of South Africa's online retail sector? Like, what are the key trends, opportunities, and challenges that you see in this market today?
Sure. I mean, if you look at it right now, South Africa's online retail sector is probably in its strongest growth phase I think we've ever seen. If you look at about 10 years ago, so a decade ago, online shopping barely existed in South Africa. But today, if we look at it, it's about close to 10% of all retail sales. So that's about more than 130 billion rand expected this year. And if you look at the fastest growth really is, with apps like 6060 and Woolworths Dash, fashion and beauty. And, talking about 6060, I'm not sure of the exact number, but a couple of weeks ago, the news sort of broke that 6060, I think in terms of, I don't know if it was revenue or profit, but made in the region of about 17 billion rand last year, which means it is actually now the largest e-commerce platform in South Africa, making even more money than Takealot, and that's just 6060, not the rest of Checkers or the Shoprite Group. Literally just 6060. So that really does show you that the big opportunity is convenience. As South Africans, we want speed, we want reliability, and we want trust. When you buy things online. But obviously, there's challenges. High delivery costs. We may not have had load shedding for a while, knock on wood, but it is still an ever present sort of thing in the background. And obviously, risks in logistics that still make online shopping a little bit more complex than it needs to be.
And I think while we're still speaking on 6060, I know it's not the point of discussion, but I just want to understand from you, and I'm hoping that you have the insight for in terms of giving us the clarity and understanding. Is the big conversation that as much as 6060 has seen growth in terms of, sales number, what would you say is the hesitance in allowing those individuals who are, operating the 6060 to be emerged as part of the employees of that retail store?
Obviously, you're looking at, I think, a very similar sort of situation that, with other gig economy sort of setups. So, many companies don't want to list their gig employees as actual employees, so they're contractors, which means that yes, they can earn a living, but you don't have access to things like, medical aid. You don't have things, access to proper, shall we say, job security in terms of employment contracts, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of regulation that still needs to go into the gig economy side of things. The convenience aspect, that convenience culture that we're also so fascinated by. And I know next week actually Uber and Uber Eats are releasing some information, I think, on a study they've done about the convenience economy in South Africa. But as much as we see the rise of all of these things, there's a lot of hindrances to providing long-term, viable employment for people. Also, we've all seen in the news just unfortunately, with so many Checker 6060 sort of bikes on the road and delivery bikes on the road, that's led to, certain areas where these guys will not go because it's just not safe for them. They're getting hijacked, they're getting robbed. These guys unfortunately also are driving in the rain. You don't know how roadworthy some of these bikes are. All sorts of things. So there's a lot of regulation that needs to go into this to make it more viable for the people that are looking at these opportunities as e-commerce grows, as a way to make money and actually support their families.
And now, still speaking on the retailers, what other opportunities are there for them to continue maximizing, what e-commerce has in store for them?
The opportunities are huge. As we said, e-commerce right now looks to only be about 10% of all retail sales. So that tells you that there's a massive opportunity for growth. But what you can see right now is that South Africans really are shopping online way more frequently than before. And retailers that offer faster delivery, transparent pricing and loyalty benefits, like free delivery and that sort of thing, those are the ones who are getting rewarded with, the loyalty from the customers. Those are the ones that people will keep going back to. So, retailers need to look at, how they can win by making checkout simple. Building trust through clear communication, embracing mobile first channels. So if you have an issue, can you contact them via WhatsApp instead of having to send an email or go into an app and do this and then wait for that? Those are the things that are quickly becoming, how people engage. So if businesses start treating online as central to their strategy and, not as, oh, a thing we have to do because we have to do it, but not a focus. So as a side project, if they focus on this as central to their strategy, then really they're going to be able to tap into this momentum and really move things forward.
Mm. And now seeing that there's also, international retailers also, penetrating into the South African market, do you think that this will change how we shop or everything will just remain as is? And if it does change, what does the change mean for, for the South African customer base and the retailers that exist within South Africa?
It's such an interesting question because when we all heard that Amazon was coming to South Africa, I think we all were expecting, Amazon like we see it in the US or we see it in other parts of the world, and we were like, that's it, take a lot, all these other guys are done. Amazon's going to just dominate the market as they've done in so many other places. And that's proven to not be the case. We've got Amazon, we've got Shein, Temu, all of these guys have raised the bar when it comes to, whether it's choice, whether it's delivery, whether it's low prices, but it's not been that sort of whitewashing or that sort of onslaught and that avalanche of a takeover that we were expecting. The local players are proving to be incredibly resilient. And there's a lot of trust from the South African market in platforms like Takealot, like Checker 6060, like Woolworths, far more than we're seeing with the international sites. So what the global entrants really have done is they forced everyone to step up the game. They forced all of these other companies to sharpen the competition, push prices down, make delivery faster. And really what that means for us as consumers is, we're going to benefit from better service and, more options. And I think we're going to continue to see that happen more and more. I mean, there's even been talk about, obviously we know Checkers has been trialing smart trolleys. And there's been rumors sort of floating around of Checkers even wanting to look into drone delivery. And I know other drone delivery companies have been partnering with companies like DJI to see where it is viable to try drone delivery in different parts of the country. None of those things would have happened if we hadn't had these global entrants come in at the time that they have come in.
Mm. And seeing that, the, global entrants are pushing the locals to sort of catch up and also try and find other innovative ways of getting the customer base and offering that convenience. What do you think it would take for government to also, get the push to ensure that, in terms of regulation and policies, it matches and also protects its,
Mm.
local markets?
I think that's a very complex question, and I think it's not just a problem we have in South Africa where we have, this question of how does government regulate these things. I think we're seeing it worldwide because, for me, tech is what I live and breathe every single day. And I was just having this discussion yesterday with another tech colleague of mine at a different publication, and we were saying there's so much happening that we ourselves we feel like we're just about keeping up. What is it like for the average person or someone who doesn't live and breathe this the way we do every day? And that includes, government. So they've now got to sit there with people who maybe aren't as tech savvy as myself and some other people might be. And that's not sort of tooting my own horn. It's just to understand the nuances of all these things and how this works and what the impact of this type of technology is on this, that, and that means that you've got to have a really in-depth knowledge, and that's not something that many people have. So I think we need collaboration between government and we need and these enterprises, these businesses that are moving in, but it can't just be the talk about Walmart, for example, coming into South Africa and opening Walmart branded stores in the country. It cannot just be, oh, here's a great thing that benefits what is already a massive retail giant, in the US. as you say, it's got to also benefit local people. It's got to create employment. It's got to create, jobs, and it's got to be not just gig economy things. It's got to be things that people can actually build a life on. I go to this job, I get my salary every month, I can support my family, my kids, I can afford to send my kids to a good school. Those are the conversations we need to have, and I think that is actually something that I wouldn't say hindered Amazon coming to the country, but I think that was a big bone of contention before they were actually finally able to come into the country. There was a big thing about what is the job employment going to be? Are you taking jobs away from local businesses, or are you creating jobs? And I'm not going to say positively one way or another, but what I will say is you can see Amazon's big push has been, when they launched, how do we support smaller local entrepreneurs? How do we give them a platform? So I think if they continue to sort of move down that line, there's been many things with Amazon as well where, they've worked with local departments, and how do we empower people with knowledge, with skills? How do we train them to be able to, if it's not on our platform, still be able to build an e-commerce platform for themselves and sell? I think we just need more of that education and that focus from government saying, we don't necessarily have to focus on the tech specifically. We need to focus on the impact.
Mm. And certainly a lot of South Africans would really behind be it a retail store, even international retail store, if they know that the retail store is here to benefit them as, citizens of South
Mm.
Africa, especially with the issue of unemployment. And I think with that, I want to find out from you in terms of what do you think are the biggest challenges that online retailers need to really overcome to make shopping online easier and more reliable for South Africans, as we're seeing this online scamming and so much that's happening online, that a lot of people are, steadily trying to move to online shopping but are seeing all these,
Mm.
barriers that push them 4 steps back.
One of the things we've spoken about so many times, on the show is security.
Mm,
And I always say that it needs to be built in from the ground up and not something that's bolted on afterwards. And I think that is one of the big challenges. You spoke about, scams and all these things. I think that's one of the challenges we're seeing right now is so many of these scams are so convincing now because of AI, that these companies are now trying to bolt on security afterwards, and it's becoming a challenge. And that obviously means you're going to end up losing customers. Because why would I go to a platform where, I believe my card has been skimmed or my details have been used, and then someone has, I don't know, maybe bought themselves a ticket overseas or whatever the case might be. So I think that's definitely one of the things. But I think the top three really are, delivery costs, infrastructure, and then obviously trust. In South Africa, logistics are expensive. It unfortunately just is, and the impact of load shedding, has added so many costs over the years to retailers in South Africa that their counterparts don't face in other parts of the world, even other parts of the continent. So, there's that sort of legacy problem that we've still got to deal with. Security, as I've said, I think there are a lot of people still worry about security when you're paying online. And that's why visible safeguards, biometric logins, fraud alerts, instant refunds are becoming more and more important. And also being able to contact someone. We just mentioned WhatsApp just a few minutes ago. Reliable channels where you can contact someone for assistance and not have to phone and wait and you hear, your call is important to us, your number, blah, 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 in the queue. That sort of thing. If retailers can make the process feel safe, secure, and effortless, more people will shift to shop online.
mm. And Brendan, in closing, I'm going to ask you a very loaded question because we're out of time, and I
Okay.
just want to make sure we get the most out of this moment. And with that, I want to ask, what advice do you have for these businesses that are traditional retailers, and they would also like to see themselves integrated within the e-commerce market to help them keep up with these times? And also, what opportunities and challenges do you foresee regarding online shopping?
I think the first step really is, as I said earlier, is to think of online as not something separate, but as something that is a crucial part of your business. And I think a company that's really done it incredibly successfully in South Africa is Shoprite X, which is that special division of the Shoprite Group that has created 6060 and all of these other very innovative things that we've seen the group do. For them, it's not been, oh, just the side product that's sort of, put in a dark corner in the office. This has now become a core focus of what the brand does. And by investing in that, we've seen them, as I said, become now the biggest e-commerce platform in the country, outpacing Takealot, Amazon, everybody else. this just shows the potential if you make this that key portion of it. The future of retail is going to be blended. People may browse online, but they might still want to walk into a shop and actually go and check out, what this object is, especially if it's something larger like, I don't know, a bed or a desk or, something for your living room or something like that. Or it might be a case of they go into the store, see it, and then be like, let me go and check online where I can have it delivered to me. And maybe because, I've got loyalty with this platform, then they'll actually give it to me at a slightly cheaper price. But it just shows it can't be one or the other. It's got to be both. So they've got to invest in a smooth experience across both. Delivery times need to be short, returns need to be easy, and loyalty continues to be one of the biggest things. I think unfortunately one of the companies that have missed a massive opportunity when it comes to loyalty is a company we all know very well, Pick and Pay. They were one of the first, and now what do you do with your smart saver points? Or your smart shopper points as opposed to Checkers 6060 with, their Checkers Extra Savings card. And obviously don't ignore mobile. I think those are the biggest things because WhatsApp, mobile payments, that's where South Africa continues to lead, not just on the continent, but worldwide. And that's where most people are comfortable shopping. So, I think there's a lot that happens there. I think the opportunity is massive. By 2027, we're looking at online shopping expected to make up at least 12% of all retail sales. And that shows that there's a permanent shift in how South Africans are going to spend. So the challenge is making sure it's inclusive. Everybody, not just people in rural areas, but townships, rural areas, lower income groups have the same access to these things as people do in sort of more connected, more affluent areas. Because we need to have retailers who solve for affordability and accessibility and, of course, trust. Those are going to be the big winners in the country.
Brandon, thank you so much, for coming in every Wednesday and really enlightening us on what really is happening, especially when it comes to, all things tech, e-commerce, and everything that is, evolving and helping us evolve with it rather than, always remaining in the dark or behind. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you always for the great conversation.
Viewers at home, that was our tech expert Brendan Peterson enlightening us on in terms of what online store is here to offer and what it means for you and I, be you a business person or just a consumer at that. Hope that was quite helpful.